kill the brain and you kill the ghoul.
Welcome back, you beautiful disasters, to another episode of Cold Dead Heart. This episode, we are bringing you a deep dive into the new film, In a Violent Nature. With me today are Ken and Lena.
Hello.
All right, guys. So, Lena, how have you been?
Oh, I've been great. I've been in a bit of a summer break, visiting another country, been to a lot of amusement parks, and just busy with
Oh, cool.
work.
Right on.
But otherwise, I had to make a bit of a pause on horror, sadly. But I've still watched some, luckily. Actually, I have been starting to get into horror again with taking part in our challenge, the 31 Days of Horror. It's been a bit of a tough challenge, like picking together all the movies. But so far, I have watched Night Swim, which was a bit of a tough start, and Climax today, the horror musical kind of thing based on a true story,
Right on.
which was very interesting, very artistic. Outside of the challenge, I only got around to watching Clickbait Unfollowed and finally watching Maxine after it came out.
Nice. I know you were excited about that one.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. And it paid off.
Nice.
So what about you, Ken?
Last weekend I saw Substance in the theater, which was kind of mind blowing. And like you, I'm also knees deep into the 31 Days of Horror challenge. So I compiled a big list, and this year's a little bit special because my goddaughter is actually doing the challenge with me this year. So we're watching the same movies, the same nights, and then chatting about them the next day, which is kind of cool.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, I love it. She's my horror buddy, so the fact that we came up with this idea to do the same movies this year was really cool because there's a lot of classics that she still hasn't seen. So I'm trying to do this nice mix of my favorite iconic movies and then new movies that are out right now. So there's always that. When she watches a movie I've seen 100 times that I watched when I was a kid, I already have preconceived notions of it. And then it's almost like I'm leading that conversation. But when we watch new movies together that neither of us have seen, then it's kind of cool because we bounce ideas off each other, right? So I'm enjoying that. Full disclosure, we're recording on October 2nd. So yesterday was the first day, and our movie was Hellbound, Hellraiser 2, which anyone who knows me knows that was my first real favorite horror movie as a kid. Still the top movie to this day. So I had to make that the number one. She's never seen it. We watched Hellraiser together 2 years ago, the first one. So I was really pumped about that. She loved it. That's about it on the server, on the Cold Dead Heart server. We're in full swing doing horror movie streams every single day. Friday streams, like Friday horror marathons, were a big thing last year. This year we're doing we're going to try and do all 31 days classic horror movie streams, and then hopefully on the Friday we'll still get those marathons going. So that's been pretty cool. What about you, Gigi?
Well, I have been having to throttle myself on the 31 Days of Horror because I want to watch everything immediately.
Right.
But I have been enjoying it. Today I watched The Watchers, and then yesterday I watched In a Violent Nature, which I'm really excited for us to talk about. And just to recap for our listeners, we're going to break things up into the good, the bad, and the bloody.
Yeah.
All right.
So that's how we're going to run the conversation. Everyone's going to talk about the things they liked, things that they didn't really connect with, and then we're going to finish on all the kills, the gore, the practical effects, and round out the conversation. So I'm excited to get into it. New format, season 2. Let's do it.
Yeah. All right, Lena, want to get us started? What did you like?
Well, the good about the movie, in my opinion, even though the story concept wasn't new, I liked the perspective it was filmed in. Yeah. I think we all liked that. I think it was what all of us drew to the movie in the first place.
Yeah, that was the big selling point, right? Was a slasher from the perspective of the slasher. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I know the server was full of it, full of excited people. I also really like the camera work. Usually, a lot of slashers are very flashy, very
Choppy.
heavy,
Yeah.
and I love that this one was very scenic, slow, took its time.
The cinematography was gorgeous in this.
The sound design was so beautiful. A classic slasher villain, I think. Like the killer was a classical My Bloody Valentine kind of style.
Yeah. Very reminiscent of the Miner.
And without getting into detail about the gory, the effects were phenomenal. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah. No, I fully agree with you. The scenery was just gorgeous. I think I've mentioned before, like this was filmed up in the area where we used to go camping as teenagers. So it was very familiar, very reminiscent. And you don't see, like, that's beautiful land up there. And you don't really see it a lot. You see it in wide pans, I think, in a lot of movies and shows. But this movie really, like, the scenery, the actual nature itself was a huge star, like a leading role in this movie, which I thought was really cool. You mentioned the sound. I'm a huge fan of like film audio, like scores and stuff like that. Like I feel like it's part of the art of
It
making
is
a movie.
for sure. Like, what would Beetlejuice be without the like iconic Danny Elfman?
Absolutely.
Score.
Even go like super simple indie, like the original Halloween. Like the score kind of lifts and drops your anxiety throughout the movie at the right time. It's a marriage between visual and audio. Now this movie had no score to speak of, but it totally did. Like that was one of the things that people said, like there's no score, but nature was the score. And the way that nature, the sounds of the actual landscape and the heavy stomping of the feet, which I feel like that's your dana is the stomping of the killer's feet. But I feel like the remix and the speeding up and slowing down and the combination of different sounds was really smartly done. And it wasn't until my second watch that I really, really appreciated how clever they were with the sound, because it is totally a score. It's just a score made up of the recordings of the landscape that they were in. So I thought it was pretty cool. Nice. I think the icon status of the killer, like he had a really good look, really good design, grimy, dirty, kind of a mix between like a Jason Voorhees and the Miner. There was a lot to like about this. The cinematography, I think the camera work, they really wanted to let the scenery shine in a lot of these shots. I know there was a lot of complaints, which we're going to get to like right away. But I think when you sit back and you watch some of these scenes, especially when they jump forward, like you get this long shot of him walking, and then they jump forward and you're in a completely different scene and he's walking and they jump forward. Contrary to any complaints, I thought those were beautiful shots. And tricky to do because it's almost like the killer hasn't moved, but the scenery has moved. And it's giving you this progression of time, which I thought was super clever. So I enjoyed that. How about you, G?
So initially, one of the things I liked is that it had a completely new perspective on a slasher, because we're following him. The second thing I liked is that it took an ancient sort of theme that we see all over the world. And I love it when horror movies take stuff like that. The idea of his locket was taken, he's going to come get it. You've taken something from a tomb and now the monster is going to come get you.
Yeah.
And it's like a super old story, right? We see it all over the place.
Yeah.
And I like that. I like that was incorporated. one of the other things I liked was that at the end, when she's in the car with the ranger lady and she's talking about that bear, I liked how it kind of wrapped it up into like what was the point of his violence and all of this stuff. And it's like, there is no point. Some stuff is just violent.
Yeah.
And I like that tickled the absurdist portion of my brain that sometimes I like to sink into. And I like that. You know, sometimes the point of a thing is just to be that thing. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah. No, I can totally appreciate that. Now, I wonder though, is there a bigger conversation to be had about, is this like an angry spirit that is taking over beings? Like, they never really saw that bear. Even the ranger didn't see the bear that they're talking about at the end, right? It attacked him. They make a point of saying it attacked him from behind. And then when the team showed up, which they said he had only drowned for maybe a minute, right? A minute or two. They say that. And the bear's nowhere to be seen. They never saw it again. So no one actually saw it. So in my mind, I'm like, was that like a zombie bear, maybe?
Yeah,
That,
or was it that guy? Or was it Johnny?
Or was it the guy? Yeah. Well, they did mention the bear tracks, and the ranger was a tracker.
Okay.
Like after the first time watching, that was kind of where my head was at too. But I had just watched it again while I was prepping notes for this talk, and they do mention like the bear tracks. There's bear tracks everywhere. They make a point of saying that. So it definitely was a bear. It was 10 years. That was a 30-year-old story. Johnny died 20 years.
Oh, okay. So maybe it is just like evil.
10 years before he even died. Yeah.
Okay.
So, but that leads me to think that if they were talking about some kind of spiritual force, maybe it's jumping, you know, and maybe this was like the corpse of a bear that was brutalized by hunters or trapped, you know, that first scene when the ranger's yelling at the trapper for putting these, you know, random obligatory torture traps in the woods. Maybe it was a bear that got snagged up in some trap that a hunter never went back for, and he just laid there and suffered. And then this angry spirit found him, and he got his revenge, right? Just a thought. Maybe
yeah,
I'm going
that's
a little
interesting.
too deep into it, but
No, I like that. That's
Like
kind of
that it's-
interesting. A spirit of vengeance and violence.
right. But like a nature, like an angry nature spirit, right?
Interesting.
Which would tie into that whole hen syndrome that they were talking about, like just killing indiscriminately. Sometimes animals don't need reasons.
Right, yeah.
Sure.
So,
okay,
what was our critical commentary? What about the bad? Do you have anything to say, Lena?
Well,
let her rip. You're not going to say anything that hasn't been said already.
no, I wanted to say if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. But we're here to criticize, and I've made it vocal in the server that it's a movie that I don't praise as much as others do, but mainly because of my preference of faster paced movies. For me, the bad was that it was very slow paced, and I have, due to like some personality things, not a big attention span, which is why I love slashers in the usual sense, because they're mostly very fast paced. So having like a 5-minute shot of him walking through the woods, my mind was getting bored, which is good for showing off the scenery, but not good for someone with a low attention span.
I know.
Common complaint, right? Yeah.
That was actually mine as well. And I know I hate saying this, especially after Ken saying how much he enjoyed it. But like my main thing was that it's too much like B footage. And I love nature. But I even looked at my husband. We were watching it together, and I said, I feel like I'm watching a hiking YouTube video.
Right.
Which is not necessarily a bad thing, but not.
Don't misunderstand. I thought those shots were gorgeous, but I can like honestly, critically say like I get where they're going. You know, I get what their thought process was, because when you're there, and I think both of you could agree with me when you see something beautiful with your own eyes and you take a picture of it and you show someone, they don't get even,
No.
you know,
Yeah, you're right.
they don't even get half of the beauty that you'll actually see with your eyes or a picture,
Mhm.
right? So I could see, the team, the director and the cinematography team out there, and they're shooting and they're like, this is gorgeous, right? Like, we need to really expand on this. And without the realization that it's not going to translate to a screen the way that you want it to. I feel like I might actually get a little bit more appreciation for it than most people, because I could close my eyes and picture this landscape, right? Like we go up there all the time. But not everyone, like, it's a rural area in Northern Ontario, right? Like, not many people globally have been there, right? So there's not, most people won't have that connection to that land. It's funny, it's an 1.5 hour long movie that feels like it's 2.5 hours long. And that's the reason. And those 5-minute shots that we're talking about, I actually timed them a bit today when I was rewatching it. They're only like 1.5 minutes, but they do feel like they're 5 minutes long, right? Because nothing is happening. So yeah, it's definitely a criticism. I love what they were going for. I get it. I understand it. I appreciate it. But I do think it was the wrong decision, or at least the stretching, the stretch out of it was the wrong decision. I understand that. I get it. And I do agree. My big problem was, and it wasn't all bad, but some of the dialogue, with the victims, I thought was like cheesy for no reason. Like, some of it was really good. Like, there was a bit of banter and conversations. I'm like, this is me and my teenage buddies, right? But then there was silly stuff where it just kind of like went a little bit too far. Like that conversation between the two girls at the lake. Like, I wanted to shoot myself in the head. You know what I mean? There was conflict for no reason. I felt like when she like, they want to hook up, but like she was being overtly rude and dropped her clothes in the water. Like, that was unnecessary, and it didn't. It didn't do anything for the story. The guy who's mad that his girlfriend brought her friend who's going through a hard time, and he's being like overtly rude to him around the campfire in front of everyone. It was like, it's unnecessary. Like that conflict is unnecessary and it serves no purpose. And there were scenes that made me uncomfortable for no reason. Here's my biggest one. My biggest problem was that the whole concept, the interesting concept behind this, was the movie through the killer's perspective. And each time that they broke that, I felt it, and it felt disappointing, because also unnecessary. Like at the campfire, when they focus on the kids and they're kind of like camera circling around them, like there was very easy ways to keep the killer's perspective there. And I know the argument could be said he was standing right behind them. So in a lot of those shots, he was probably there. So the camera was in front of him rather than behind him, which is fine, as long as he's in the shot, right? But so much of that scene was just focused on these kids, and they're like, 40% terrible, banter. And it broke that feeling of being, following the killer, even though that he's there. I do love the fact that they mentioned that he was in the picture afterwards, right? So there was that. And
so speaking of kills though, and like dropping stuff in the lake, what are our favorite bloodiest moments, our favorite kills?
Lena, you want to start?
I think we all have the same one.
Oh.
I mean, how can you... I'm just gonna drop it. How can you top that? The yoga kill, bending her into herself.
Yeah. Can I just say, when I watched it, my first thought was like, I feel for her, because I can't get through a yoga session without getting interrupted. And gosh darn it, that's a terrible interruption.
Right?
But it was so
At least
cool.
she got a pose.
She got a pose. She nailed that asana.
Yeah.
And held it for a good while.
Mm-hmm.
So I did a kill count today. We got 8 kills in this movie. So I've got good and bad to say here because there were some just absolutely epic ones. I think the most important thing people need to know about this movie is that it was super low budget.
Mm-hmm.
So the accomplishments, I think, really need to be emphasized here because on a low budget film with, this relatively amateur crew, I think they threw together some magic and it really shines in the kills. So the entire concept of the film I thought was really good. Sure, there was some shortfalls, but the kills are, I think, where this one really, really shined. So there was 8 kills. The first one I feel like we got super ripped off because it was about 20 minutes in and we didn't see it. And we followed him tracking this dude for so long to not see the actual kill. I thought was kind of cheap. Even if they would have done it in just a quick classic slasher butcher way. But to have that hand reaching for him, I do like that he got caught in his own trap. That's not lost on me. I thought that was cool. But the hand reaching for him, and then you just see the bloody hand back inside reaching for the locket. Now, what I did notice on the second time that I didn't notice the first is that he walks by that kill scene, and you do see a little bit fuzzy in the background, like some good mutilation, including a severed hand that I didn't notice the first time. But a close up on that even would have, where the camera just kind of dragged on the scene, I think would have filled that in for me. But I do feel like it burned too much time and it didn't really capitalize on what was the first kill in the movie. Now, the second kill was right? The second kill, so here's the thing. So I really like the second kill. That's where he cuts the guy's head in half, right? Because that tongue sticking out of the severed half of the head, I thought was just brilliant, right? But here's the thing. After feeling a bit ripped off in that first kill, like not getting to see it, I did think that second kill, as excellent as it was too fast. There was no struggle. There was no, which not everyone has to be, but I'm already built up from kind of missing out on that first one that it was just so fast. Now, it was good, but it was, pretty quick, right? And then another thing that I caught today, when he drags that body to the ranger station where he gets his mask, which I feel like is a pretty kind of iconic moment. He's dragging that body by the tongue, which I never noticed the first time, but I'm like, that is cool. And he smashes the window with the top of the severed head. I loved all of that. That was pretty cool.
The next one wasn't really anything special.
No, the dragging her under the water was kind of...
Honestly,
that was another ripoff, right?
More I was expecting something I don't know, was it Freddy versus Jason or was it just a Friday the 13th movie? But when this girl is hiding underneath the
dock?
Yeah, underneath the dock, and then the machete goes through the dock.
Yeah.
I was expecting something like that.
I get that they didn't want to be traditional, and I respect that. But even show me some blood coming out of the water. See, a bloody hook coming out of her body when her body floats up. It just seemed like a cop-out kill, I guess. Yeah, now again, super low budget, and obviously they put a lot of money on what is a really small budget into some really cool effects. Some of the practical effects in this I thought were just dynamite, Hollywood class level, better than, So I can't, without knowing behind, maybe they had something planned there and they ran out of money. I don't know. Maybe it was going to be added in post, but they didn't have the funds for it. We don't know, right? But it in the finished product, it felt like a cop-out kill. Right? Almost worse than that first one that we didn't even see, because at least we got a little bit of background gore. This was just nothing. Girl disappears. Number four is yoga, right? So I think we could all agree one of the best kills in horror history, right?
Honestly, up there.
Yeah. I think it's either my favorite kill or tied for my favorite. We're getting up to what might beat it, but I think the length of it was good. Again, there was no real struggle there, but
I
it's
mean, how could she
yeah, fair.
struggle?
Fair.
You immediately had the arm through her.
Well,
So,
I
But
mean,
it
I was
was
like, run down the hill, do something. That's my only other
first time
complaint.
watching it. I was like, jump, dude, just
Just
jump.
yeah.
you
Right?
can walk
Like,
down that. That's not a sheer cliff. Like just walk. Just go.
give it. Yeah.
Yeah, that was my problem. Like
Mhm.
that's why also one of the big letdowns for me were the characters because some of
Yeah.
their decisions were.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It kind of reminds me of some of the more
I can agree
like
with that.
psychological thrillers though, like in Funny Games and mostly that one or The Purge, I guess in a way, where it's like
Mm,
Okay.
people's reactions they freeze instead of taking action, and it's
Yeah.
so frustrating.
Yeah. No, and that I think needs to be taken into account more often when we're like horror fans who watch horror movies all the time build this like brain instinct to, you know what I mean,
yeah.
like what you do. But I feel like most people would just freeze, right?
It's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
why we have a
So,
freeze response, right?
right.
Fight or
Exactly.
flight, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think 5. So that was 4. Kill number 4. I think 5 and 6 almost happen simultaneously, right? That's the two
Yeah.
guys in the wood.
Mm-hmm.
It's the hatchet and then the head smash.
Yeah. So we get another cop out, like another lame kill for number 5, right? That's just it's cool the way that it happens, right? They think he's kind of dead and they're running. The way he gets up is a little bit silly, like just how quick he gets up. But he's
Yeah.
up on like a dart. Like he's just laying there on the ground, they're running away, and then all of a sudden he just springs up, right? But just like how quick he turns his head and throws that axe, I thought that was pretty cool. But the fact that that was an entire kill, right? And like nothing more to that dude. I
Little
thought
bit
was a little bit of a
snoozy.
cop out. But then right afterwards, like right beside it, that fucking like stone crush kill. Holy hell. That was excellent. I appreciated it so much more on the second time because of just how well like they build up that anxiety when they're just kind of following him. You hear those heavy footsteps and the guy screaming in the background that you don't see yet. And that bird's eye perspective over top of him as he picks up the rock and like splatters his head. That was gore glorious. Like just so perfect. And it looked dynamite. Like kudos to everyone for that shot because it was beautiful. So one lame, and then right beside it, you pick it right back up with like a beautiful gore shot. I loved it.
It's always one cop out, one good one. One cop
I noticed that it literally goes back and forth the whole movie, right? Like it's like one cheap one like stellar one cheap one stellar one. So now, G, we are at the ranger kill.
So one of the things that I really liked was the brutality of him snapping his spine. Like
Right.
Oh yeah.
that was so incredible. But also the entire time I'm like, why are you moving closer? You obviously shot him from a distance. Why are you closing that distance? This is
That
dumb.
whole conversation that they were having with the gun over him. Okay, I'm gonna count to like. Why are you doing that in arm's reach?
Right.
Take 2 steps back
Mhm.
and hand him the gun.
That was
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
what the hell?
But yeah, so that was amazing. And I kind of wish that he would have just like either left him there, which I would have thought of as brutal
Yeah, that
because
would've
you're
been
leaving
terrifying,
some yeah. But then bringing him to the log splitter, I was kind of
Such a
like
wasted opportunity.
it was honestly a little boring.
Yeah, and because
Really?
it drags
To
so
me.
long. Like one, they actually took the time to show you how a log splitter works on a log, which I'm
Yeah.
like, who needs that? Who is
Right?
that for?
Yeah.
Who doesn't realize what this is going to do, right? So
Yeah.
it's a chunk of time wasted, right, with no benefit. And then, so this guy's already fucked up. He's going to die no matter what, right?
Mhm.
But he chops off a piece of the arm and then finishes it off with the head, which, okay, if you invest the money into like these fake limbs or whatever, like, and it was gruesome. Don't get me wrong. It was totally
it was
gruesome.
gruesome. For sure.
But like in my mind, as soon as I like saw that log splitter, I'm like, now no one's gonna do it better than Terrifier, the split down the middle.
Oh
right?
my
Like,
God, yeah.
their scene is
Mhm.
legendary. But
Oh,
like with a slow moving compression blade,
Yeah.
there was a golden opportunity to lay him vertically along that track. Now again, a fake arm and a fake head, like practical effects wise, is going to be a lot cheaper than an entire body, right?
Mhm.
Like, let's just get that straight. Like, all the gore effects you would need, but like it just felt like wasted.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you're right. To just leave him on the floor would have been like a scarier death than
Yes.
chopping off one hand and then directly his head afterwards.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, it was a good gory scene, and then I did like like the actual effects of like when the head comes off there at the end, and you're like kind of even watching it twice. Like the second time, I grit my teeth through the whole thing, but it wasn't any more painful than just seeing his eyes twitch on the ground, because that is like like a living
Yes.
hell, right? Like, he's begging for death at that point, right?
Well, and I think if they'd have left it there, that's just like such a primal nightmare for most people.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
And
that's
so
nightmare fuel for sure.
yeah, I wish they would have just left it. All right.
I just think this death was so nice to me because it felt personal in the way that he was, I already was against him. I already know how to fight him. So him just going all out in that way felt personal. And
yeah, I do wish that they had the money or made the decisions that if they were going to use that that log splitter blade in a kill scene, it was a vertical one, right? Like, I think that would have looked glorious. I'm not judging because, again, I don't know the finances behind it, and I know a shot like that would be expensive as hell, but it would have been like an all-out epic kill, right? Which at the end of the day, we're kind of like, meh. They put a lot into it. They put so much into it, but I feel like it's almost wasted money at the end of the day because it's not even in like the top 3 for me kills, if that makes sense. But I do appreciate it for what it was. It did, like, it came together nice. It could have been so much better, or like Gigi said, if they would have, like, that actually would have been scarier, just leaving them there twitching, right? So that's what, number 7 now? So we're coming up to the last one, which I think is either taking my number 1 kill spot or at least tied with the yoga one. And I don't think people talk about this one enough. But that stupid plan that these kids put together at the end.
Yeah.
Like, maybe it was a good plan. You know what I mean?
No,
like,
it's not. That was terrible.
No, it was a bad plan. And then he makes the same mistake again by giving his position away within arm's reach of this fucking guy.
Yeah.
Like, why would you do that?
Right.
Like, they didn't learn from the first time.
Right.
And he's such a he has that slow pace, right? That we talked about earlier, that is almost like the beat of the movie, the heartbeat of the movie.
Right.
Just walk to the fire tower. He will follow. Like,
he'll follow
you did not need a distraction or anything. You just needed to walk there.
Right. Yeah. Just go. Right?
Just kind of a comedic one as well.
Yeah, it was almost comedic, but like how fast it was. But like, that was a brutal kill shot. Like that like slam to the face.
It wasn't even cool. About the kill itself. It was just, I know I laughed my ass off when she just kept on walking and you kept on hearing the sound of him hammering and he was still at it. I was like, damn, when is he done?
Before she walks away, when she's just standing there in shock and he is just smashing that fucking like head and shoulders to just mush, like he's losing it. And he keeps going. And here's the thing that I think I love the most about it. So the gore in that shot, I think, is fantastic. And the panning back and forth from the girl's like shell-shocked face, then to the killer that's just given it, right? I thought that was golden. But here's the thing I love the most. So now she goes on her escape tour, right? Through the woods. And when every single time she stops to turn her head back to see if he's following her, you hear that smashing, but she's so far away. And it dawned on me on the rewatch, that sound is stuck in her head, right? Like that's the psychology behind that. She's not still hearing it. She's down valley. She's over hills. She's far away at this point. But every time she stops, she could still hear it ringing in her head, right? Like her friend's body just getting smashed. And I thought that was friggin' brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
She's so traumatized from it, yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't even think it in that way. I just thought he kept on going.
Yeah. Yeah, and same with me on the first time when I was kind of giving it like an introspective watch today. It dawned on me what they were going for there, and I thought that was cool. And it's also when all the sound that we've heard throughout the movie, the footsteps, the crickets, the birds, every sound that we've heard, like we talked about, like how this soundtrack was kind of a nature soundtrack, they all get amplified in her like panicked mind as she's running and crawling and getting sticks through her leg. Like those sounds just get louder and louder, and they're amplified and they're overlapped. And I thought that was done really well. I thought that was a cool way to kind of do that scene, is really using the soundtrack of the movie in an amplified way. This is the big escape now, right? So I thought that was pretty cool. Okay, so we've pretty much wrapped up, the good, the bad, and the bloody here. Before we get into any final thoughts, I want to run a theory by you guys. What if the killer isn't Johnny? What if the killer's Johnny's dad?
Yeah.
But
now,
but what about the scene with the car?
I've got some reasons.
Okay.
So I've got some reasons. There's the car that would say that I'm wrong. And there's the scene at the beginning when he sees his father talking to him, giving him his mother's pendant, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those go against this argument. But hear me out. So the kid was a little kid that got killed, right? His father died the next day, right?
Yeah.
And then 5 days later, the entire camp gets massacred, right?
Oh.
When we see the character, which is 20 years later, the first time we see him, not only is he a fully grown person, but he's also in fully grown person clothes that are obviously degraded and worn, right?
Mm-hmm.
So here's my theory. Is one, if the kid somehow mutated in 5 days to be, full size, he would have broken out of his clothes. Maybe he got some other clothes. But here's my theory. When he sees his father, assuming it's the kid, talking to him, handing him the pendant, he's standing in front of a mirror, right? It's a mirror where he sees that reflection, right? So it's almost like he's looking at himself giving his son the pendant.
Oh.
Yeah.
Right? During that replay.
Okay.
And the scene with the car, he smashes it at the end, right? And I'm thinking, as I'm watching it for the second time, what if that's like playing with cars? This kid loved cars. If that was just something that he did with his young, mentally disabled son, they played cars together. And then, so he sits down and he gives him this memory of playing with his son. And then, the reality of, what's happened sets in and he crushes it in his hand. Right? Like, I don't see the kid crushing the car. I see the dad crushing the car. I see the dad going on a murder spree to avenge his son and get his wife's locket back.
That's an interesting Ken theory.
And that's, you gotta have one per show.
Okay. I'm kind of digging it. I don't know if I'm sold. Yeah, I'm going to let it marinate in my brain. Yeah. Think about it. I like it.
Like a little Pamela Voorhees action.
Right. And I don't think for a second I wasn't thinking of good old Pamela. All right, final thoughts, guys. Lena, where are you sitting with this?
I mean, it's not my favorite, but it's a movie I will always recommend to people that want to see like a good slasher. Like I get asked a lot, like, what do you recommend that I may not have heard about? And I always recommend this one. Because it's
So
not
it
as
wasn't
famous in
necessarily
Germany.
for you, but you can appreciate it and recommend it to people. Do you have a score out of 10?
Exactly. I
A
would
personal score out of 10.
still put it at a 7, if not
Yeah.
7.5 out of 10. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. So I like it from concept to cinematography. I love the kills. I recommend it to people too, but with a warning. You know, like just like know what you're getting into. Don't expect Hollywood. Expect a longer, drawn out kind of thing. But about 7.5 is where I sit with it, and that's pretty high for me. I liked it a lot. I appreciated it. I think more than most people. I get all the gripes with it. And I can't say that those gripes are wrong, but I also really appreciate what the team was trying to do. And I thought for me, anyways, it was successful from cinematography to the killer perspective, even though it did break a few times, which took me out of that. Took me out of that moment when it did that. For the most part, I thought it was very successful. And I liked that. I said about 7.5 with a recommendation with an asterisk. What about you, G?
I'm going to go a little bit lower than you guys, and I'm going to give it a personal score of 6 out of 10. Only because slashers are not my genre, but I see the time and the effort and the quality and attention to detail that they put into it, and I appreciate that. So that's what's lifting it out of like from a 4.
Right.
But it's not one that I would decide to watch again. And so I can't give it like a 7 and above. So I'm just going to leave it at a 6 where I see what they were doing. I like what they did, but it was not for me.
I can't argue at all with that. Yeah, like I totally get what you're saying about the rewatchability of it, because the first time watching it, which I really liked. I liked it the first time around, but I did know coming out of it, I'm like, this is not a movie that I'm like Friday the 13th part 3 and 4 I could watch 3 times a year. You know what I mean? The Crow I watch 5 times a year. Hellraiser I watch 5 times a year. This is not a movie I'll want to rewatch. But then I did rewatch it because one, it's on me and my goddaughter's 31 Days of Horror list. But more importantly, because we were also doing this talk about it, I wanted it to be fresh in my head. And I will tell you, I did enjoy it more the second time around, for whatever that's worth. But I'm with you. After watching it the first time, I was like, I appreciate it, but I'm not going to watch it again. But I did like it better the second time. So my final thought.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ken and Lena, for joining me this week as we deep dived into the slasher film In a Violent Nature. And we really appreciate you, dear listeners. Please reach out to us in the comments or in the server about your thoughts about the movie and any feedback that you have about our episodes. We would love to hear from you. And next week, our movie is Immaculate, which I'm very excited about.
Oh,
yeah. So
very.
Thank you all. We appreciate you from the bottom of our cold, dead hearts.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.